In 1947, a Bedouin shepherd chasing a stray goat threw a stone into a dark cave and heard the sound of shattering pottery. He didn't just find ancient scrolls, he accidentally shattered the glass casing of our protected history. Most of what the public was told about the Dead Sea Scrolls focused on biblical accuracy and the preservation of the Old Testament. But in the deep recesses of the Rockefeller Museum and the private vaults of the elite, a different dossier exists. Hidden among the thousands of fragments was a specific set of parchments that do not fit the narrative of the Garden of Eden. They speak of a world that existed before the foundations of the current earth were laid, a world of complex civilizations, angelic rebellion, and a cataclysm so total that it left the earth in a state of Tohu wa-Bohu, waste and void. Today, and we open the archive on the 1947 discovery that the academic world tried to label as mythological, but which the original Hebrew text reveals as historical. We are going back beyond the 6 days of creation. We are going into the gap. We are looking for the remains of the pre-Adamite world. When the first jars were opened, the world celebrated. We found the book of Isaiah, the Psalms, and the community rule. But as the years passed, certain fragments began to vanish from the public eye, specifically those found in Cave 4 and Cave 11. These fragments were not copies of the Bible as we know it. They were records of the early ones. The leaked dossier suggests that the international team of scholars appointed to translate the scrolls was under strict orders to prioritize canonical texts. When anything that suggested a timeline contrary to the established 6,000-year history of man was pushed to the bottom of the pile. Among these problematic fragments was the Genesis Apocryphon. It isn't just a retelling of Genesis, it is an expansion. It describes the earth not as a new creation, but as a reconstructed one. It hints at a landscape already scarred by war before Adam ever took his first breath. The dossier reveals that the Essenes, the keepers of the scrolls, were obsessed with this pre-Adamite history. They believed that the key to the future was hidden in the ruins of the world that came before. To understand the fragment, we must look at the language. In the traditional English translation of Genesis 1:2, we read, "And the earth was without form and void." In English, this suggests a starting point, a blank canvas. But the original Hebrew tells a different, more violent story. The word used is haya. In almost every other context in the Torah, haya does not mean was in a static sense. It means became or fell into a state of. The leaked memos from the linguistic team in the 1950s admit that a more accurate translation would be, "And the earth became a wasteland." If the earth became a wasteland, it implies that it was once something else. It implies a transition from order to chaos. This is what theologians call the gap theory, but the Qumran fragments call it the ruin. The fragments describe a Luciferian flood, not the flood of Noah, but an earlier cataclysm that wiped out a biological and spiritual civilization that had turned against the divine order. This isn't just a theory. The fragments describe the darkness upon the face of the deep as a judicial sentence, not a natural state. In Cave 4, the researchers found something that shouldn't exist, the Book of Giants. Unlike the Book of Enoch, which was known to history, the Book of Giants was a fragmented mystery until 1947. It names the entities that ruled the pre-Adamite world. These were not just big men. The scrolls described them as hybrids who dominated the flora and fauna of the earth. The fragments speak of the corruption of all flesh, a term the dossier suggests refers to genetic manipulation. They weren't just eating the animals, they were mixing the seeds. The leaked memos from the Rockefeller Museum suggest that some fragments of the Book of Giants describe cities of iron and weapons of the sky. This challenges the idea that pre-Adamite life was primitive. If these fragments are accurate, the world before Adam was a high-tech, high-occult civilization that reached a point of absolute corruption, forcing a divine reset of the planetary system. This explains why we find ooparts, out-of-place artifacts, embedded in coal seams millions of years old. They aren't mistakes. They are the debris of the world the Qumran scrolls were trying to warn us about. If this world existed, where is the physical proof? The dossier points to a specific, redacted find in Cave 12, a cave that was officially empty. Internal reports suggest that Cave 12 contained biological remains that did not match any known hominid species. These were the Nephilim of the First Era. The fragments found near these remains describe the souls of the waste. The Essenes believe that the demons we face today are not fallen angels, but the disembodied spirits of this pre-Adamite civilization, entities that belong to a world that no longer has a physical home. They are the ghosts of the gap, and the Vatican's intense interest in the 1947 discovery wasn't just about biblical history. It was about the fear that these entities might be trying to return. If the earth became a wasteland, a Tohu wa-Bohu, it was because a light had been extinguished. But in Genesis 1:3, we see the command, "Let there be light." For centuries, the Sunday school explanation has been that this was the creation of the sun, but the text itself betrays this logic. The sun, moon, and stars do not appear until the fourth day. The Dead Sea fragments found in Cave 1, specifically those associated with the War Scroll, speak of a primordial radiance that was withdrawn. The leaked memos from the 1960s translation team contain an observation by a linguist who noted that the Hebrew word for the light of day 1, hour, is fundamentally different from the lights of day 4, ma-hour. Hour is not a combustion of gas. It is an emanation of pure consciousness, a governing force. The Qumran fragments suggest that on day 1, the light was not created for the first time, but restored to a system that had been plunged into darkness following a cosmic rebellion. The pre-Adamite world lived under this Ur. It was a world where biology and spirit were not separated. When this light was withdrawn as a judgment, the atmosphere collapsed, the temperatures plummeted, and the world of the first ones was flash frozen into the geological record. What we call day 1 was actually the first day of the reconstruction. We often imagine the world before the flood, or the world before Adam, as primitive. But the Book of Giants fragments found in 1947 paint a picture that is hauntingly modern. Or they describe the Watchers and their offspring building enclosures of metal and towers that pierce the clouds. The leaked Dossier contains a report from an independent geologist who described fragments of a substance that resembled carbon fiber but was thousands of years old. The scrolls refer to these as the works of the fallen. These pre-Adamite civilizations didn't just build, they manipulated. They understood the frequency of the earth. The fragments suggest they used the voice to move stone and the breath to power their cities. This wasn't magic. It was a branch of physics we have yet to rediscover. The reason we find no steel cities today is that the cataclysm, the Tohu wa-Bohu, was a literal unmaking of the Earth's crust. The deep mentioned in Genesis 1:2 is not just an ocean. It is a chaotic, unpressurized soup of the pulverized remains of a high-tech civilization. We are literally walking on the dust of our predecessors. Why would a creator destroy an entire world? The answer found in the Qumran fragments is the mixing of the seeds. While Genesis 6 speaks of the Nephilim in the time of Noah, the Dead Sea fragments suggest this was the second time it happened. The first time was in the pre-Adamite world. The fragments describe the first ones as being obsessed with immortality. They didn't want to die, so they began to merge their essence with the animals, the plants, and the very soil of the earth. They were attempting to create a locked genetic system that the divine could not influence. The leaked memos from the Adonai Project mention that the 1947 discovery included biological samples that were not compatible with any known phylogeny. These were chimeras, genetic abominations that ruled the earth for millions of years. This is why the Hebrew text of Genesis 1:2 is so specific. The earth had to be made void. It had to be sterilized. The darkness was a quarantine. The Spirit of God hovered over the face of the waters, not just to create, but to inspect, to ensure that none of the pre-Adamite genetic corruption survived into the new Adamic era. But did it all die? The Essenes, the authors of the Dead Sea Scrolls, believed in a concept they called the spirits of the waste. According to their secret teachings found in the Songs of the Sage fragments, the demons that plague humanity are not the fallen angels themselves. A fallen angel is a celestial being. A demon, however, is the disembodied soul of a pre-Adamite entity. When their physical bodies were destroyed in the Tohu wa-Bohu, their spirits remained stuck in the gap between dimensions. The dossier reveals that the 1947 discovery included a banishing scroll, a set of instructions on how to repel these ancient spirits. Why would a shepherd in 1947 need to know how to banish pre-Adamite souls? Because the scrolls warn that as the age of man comes to its conclusion, the quarantine will weaken. The entities that were buried under the deep of Genesis 1-2 are beginning to find their way back through the cracks in our reality. The UAP phenomenon, the shadow people, the ancient aliens, the Qumran fragments suggest they are all the same thing. The original inhabitants of this planet, coming home to reclaim what was taken from them. Now we ask the ultimate question. Why was this fragment suppressed? Why is the pre-Adamite world not taught in our schools or our churches? The leaked memos suggest a Vatican-Qumran pact, established in the early 1950s. The scholars realized that if the public understood the gap theory, if they realized that a highly advanced, genetically modified civilization existed and was destroyed, it would destroy the foundations of both science and religion. Science would have to admit that the evolutionary timeline is actually a catastrophic one. Religion would have to admit that we are not the first children of God to walk this earth. Well, the dossier mentions a specific memo from 1991, where a high-ranking official states, "The sheep are not ready to know that the grass they eat grows over the graves of the gods." They fear the panic. They fear the realization that if God reset the world once, he can and will do it again. The pre-Adamite fragment isn't just a piece of history, it's a death warrant for our current civilization. We began this investigation with a stone thrown into a dark cave. We end it with a realization that our history is only a thin layer of paint over a much older, darker canvas. The 1947 discovery was a warning. It told us that we are living in a reconstructed world. The fragments are clear. The earth became a wasteland. It didn't start that way. And as we look at our own world, our own genetic experiments, our own towers that pierce the clouds, our own metal enclosures, we have to ask ourselves, are we repeating the same mistakes of the first ones? The leaked memos conclude with a terrifying prophecy found in an unreleased fragment of the Habakkuk commentary. The deep shall call to the deep, and the spirits of the first shall walk among the last. The archive is never truly closed, because while we study the fragments are studying us. What did the shepherd really see in Cave 12? And why did the empty cave have a military guard for 6 months? That is a dossier for another time. For now, remember, the darkness was here first.